Well, information is any sort of data that's out there, uh, whether it's stuff that's been in books or stuff that's only being made available electronic. It's the whole collection. There's nothing subjective about that. Whereas knowledge, everybody has their own opinion of what of that is the most important, and therefore the knowledge worth focusing on. Well, I think it can facilitate every one of those things. Al Gore is a big believer in the positives that this will allow, and in my book I'm also very keen on the positive aspects. At the same time, there are some things people are afraid about, but it's very big. It's a revolution in communications. It eliminates the idea of distance between people, and so you can redefine your ability to exercise your curiosity as a student, to go wherever you want to go, or your ability to meet people with common interests. So all those things that Al talks about, yes, they can be improved, not solved, but improved by this revolution in the way that we reach out to each other. The rate of change of technology is faster today than ever before. Some of the big advances of the past, several generations would come and go as it became popular, the telephone or even the TV set. Here, within the space of a single generation, we'll go from computers being something you can ignore very easily to the point where, for most jobs, and to really be in touch, you'll have to be comfortable with using it as a tool. That's right, there are several elements that go into this. One is the miracle of chip making. And when you talk about Moore's Law, that's the fact that chips can get twice as good every 2 years or so without any increase in price. If you combine that with the idea that communications prices are coming down with the miracle of optic fiber, and you take the PC where you have all this software to let you use those things, put them together, and it really leads to a phenomena. And the more popular it becomes, the more software we get, the more interesting it becomes, and that just brings more people into it. So it kind of feeds on itself to happen more rapidly than big changes that have come in the past. Well, every piece has come along. This idea of miniaturization, putting millions and millions of transistors into a smaller and smaller area, it's a great thing. You know, it's meant that computers have gone from being something that only big companies could think about to the point where even individual students can often have their own computer and therefore organize information and browse the way that they'd like to personally. Software is also something that's improving pretty incredibly. The software that we thought was fantastic just 5 years ago, today nobody buys because we're able to offer things that are so much better, and actually the prices are even less at the same time. Well, privacy is a two-sided issue. Particularly in the United States, there's a lot of importance assigned to freedom. Well, I'm very envious of kids growing up today. The idea that you can have these computers and reach out across this internet now and find the world of information. I would have loved to have been able to study subjects that way and find other kids with the same kind of interests. The primitive nature of the computers that I had to work with really didn't help much with education. You know, you could do math problems on them, but when it came to any other kind of subject, they were absolutely no help at all. And so kids are going to have much more opportunity. Parents will have to instill and reinforce the curiosity so that kids go and actually take advantage of the tools that are there. But these things are really a breakthrough for the kid that's willing to take advantage of it. Well, that's a very difficult problem, and one that I'll be thinking about for a big part of my life. Certainly, not allowing kids to have a lot of things that they want when they're growing up, making them do their daily chores, putting them on the right kind of allowance. I mean, I know the things that my parents did that I believe in very much. I hope to do as well raising children as my parents did. I think that's a good guidance. But this will be particularly tough because some people will be approaching them because of who they are, and There's always security concerns that come up, and the house is not a totally normal house. And instilling values is what really counts, and I'll put my heart and soul into figuring out how to do that right. That was an awful thing because my mom and I were very close and enjoyed talking about all the things that were going on. Even in my 20s and 30s, I was over at the house at least once a week talking about the neat new things or the things I was worried about. And my parents had always shared as we were growing up, what was going on for them. My dad is a lawyer, my mom being on lots of boards and very involved with community giving. And so this idea of kind of collaborating and talking about things was very natural. Even as I got Microsoft established and was an adult, we had a lot that we could enjoy brainstorming over. It was fun to get them up on the computer, and my dad started doing his taxes, my mom started doing her speeches that way, and I got them connected to the electronic mail, so it was even easier to stay in touch and schedule when we might do family activities. But all the other things beyond technology, hiring people, how to help out in the community, what's going on politically. My parents are very sophisticated, and so they always were helping me, think through issues in those areas. Well, I'd say the example they set, reading a great deal and sharing problems in a way that made it interesting to think about them. Not to worry about them, but rather to consider all the possibilities and get other people to provide their thoughts. It was really the atmosphere we had in the house about that the world is interesting, that a lot of the people they'd have over would be interesting people, and that we were treated as though our ideas were very worthwhile from quite a young age. But I'm not somebody who goes to church on a regular basis, and the specific elements of Christianity, that's not something I'd say I'm a huge believer in. The moral aspects of religion, there's a lot of merit there, and I think religion has a very, very positive impact. But in terms of doing things, I take a fairly scientific approach to explaining why things happen and how they happen. I don't know if there's a God or not. Religious principles are quite valid. Carnegie is a great example. He wrote in what he called the Gospel of Wealth the idea of how you can empower other people by giving money away in certain ways. And his big thing was the establishment of libraries, and that I think had a really beneficial effect. He set a great example. Now, he started doing that when his business career was over. He was in his 60s. My view is that what I am good at doing now is focusing on my job, trying to help Microsoft stay in a strong position, and that the amount of time I give to charitable giving, assuming I still have some wealth, that'll be increasing as I get older and very significant as I get into my 60s. Well, I was at 12 and Paul's 14. He was 2 years ahead of me in school. And in those school ages, but because I was one of the best at mathematics in the school and I didn't go to math class, when the computer came along, I had a lot of free time. And so Paul and I were part of the group that really dove in and started figuring out the computer. And part of the puzzle I got ahead of other people figuring out, part Paul got ahead, and so we really became friends working on that puzzle. That really developed into a close friendship, so that when we were starting a computer business, it was very natural for us to work together. Well, it's a little hard to separate it. I mean, there's no way there'd be a Microsoft without Paul and I having come together. Neither of us alone would have had the gumption or even the necessary insights to do what we did. Paul was more of a hardware person. He knew how to solder things together, and therefore he was always reading Electronics Magazine. Both of us did a lot in the way of software, and yet when it came to making things happen, hiring people, pulling things together, Paul looked to me to do a lot of that, even though he's done some of that as well. So it really was a true partnership. I was a little more energetic in driving things forward. Paul was a little more contemplative in terms of thinking through what to do. But nothing major happened without both of us really being fully behind it. I have a great job, and I work long hours. I don't expect the people who work for me or anyone else to work the kind of hours I do. As I've grown older, my schedule is a little more normal. In my 20s, I'd stay in 3 days at a time, and all sorts of adrenaline, and I wish I could do it now, but I just don't. And back then, there were years I didn't take much in the way of vacations. Now, for an American, I take 3 weeks a year, and a couple of years I've taken 4 weeks. For an American, that's a lot of vacation. My last one, as you said, was I got almost 3 weeks over in China exploring. Didn't take a computer with me, didn't call the office one single time. I got to read about China, see some sights. I had a few friends along, including Warren Buffett. We played a little bit of bridge and all sorts of great things. Well, it's definitely stunning to go back and look at Chinese history and how far they were ahead of the rest of civilization, how they were inventing the things and how they organized their governments and what they did in terms of building things. Just unbelievable. And now to look at that as the largest country in the world and the economic advance that's taking place, and yet politically almost a paradox of where they are with their political system. It's a fascinating area, and China will have more impact on what happens in the world over the next few decades than any other country. Well, I still work long hours. It's a great thing being married. I take a lot of nights and do things. We take a lot of weekends. I'll do some electronic mail on the weekends, but I get out to lots of movies. We travel quite a bit. And so, yeah, I'd say it's changed me. But in terms of being intense about my work, and when I do come in saying, okay, how can we do the best? We're doing this really fast, but could we do it even faster? What if we put these two ideas together? I'm still driving things every bit the same way I have been throughout my career. Well, certainly in any reasonable time frame, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because it's incredible how difficult it is to get the computer to do even the simplest things that humans do. Remember, the computer is an idiot savant. I mean, it can add lots of numbers, it can call things up, but even understanding a simple story that, say, a 4-year-old can understand, the computer cannot do that. And there are people hard at work on this to help it with natural language and a little bit of common sense. But in the next 20 or 30 years, in my lifetime, we'll be threatened by the intelligence of computers. Now, there may be a time frame where this becomes an area that people develop some concerns. But everything that's going on right now, the internet, low-cost communications, better PCs, it's about the computer as a tool, not as something with a will of its own. Well, no change is all for the best. Was the telephone a good thing? It sort of meant that people could reach out to people further away, but maybe they reached out to the people nearby a little bit less. Was TV a good thing? Well, there's lots of great educational stuff on the air, but some people would say that having that razzle-dazzle video, it made it harder for a teacher to command students' attention because they were always being measured against the humor and the action of the nightly TV shows that they couldn't possibly live up to. So every advance comes as sort of a mixed thing. Now, you don't really get a choice to say, did we want the TV to happen or not? Did we want the telephone to happen or not? Once again, with this advance, it's best to think in advance what some of the drawbacks will be and try and mitigate those, because I think these advances are going to happen like it or not. Some of the biggest concerns that come up when I talk about this future, really two: privacy, and then a have versus have not, which has many aspects. Older people who worry that You know, they're not good at computers, or people who live in rural areas who think they won't be hooked up, or poor people thinking, will this just be something for the elite schools and elite students, and they'll somehow disadvantage them all the more. Countries that think, hey, how can they get hooked in? You know, the U.S. seems to have the chip companies, the media companies, the software companies, you name it. The leading companies seem to be all in the U.S. So is this just American cultural imperialism? Is it just, you know, Disney brought to every single home around the world? And those are all serious and important concerns. The opportunity to publish, whether it's movies or text, is there for any individual all over the world. And so the barriers to distribution that have been there to getting material out are eliminated in this environment. And in fact, as these tools get into schools around the world, then you'll get equal opportunity. A very smart kid in India who goes to a school that's got the access to this network, they have the world's library at their fingertips. Even though their school can't afford all the books, they're looking at the same material as a kid from the richest school in the United States. And so they have the same opportunity to explore and learn, maybe even find each other and solve a problem together. And so once the tool is out there and people have access, it tends to close the gap, just like libraries have played that role. Our schools have always had a role in that. And so during the next 10 to 20 years, we need to decide how can we get it into schools and libraries, not just in the United States, but all over the world. I think we need to have some rules about how data is used. People would be stunned if they knew how much data about them was already on a computer. Every phone call they make, every credit charge they make, and there's some fairly loose rules about can that be used to send you a catalog, or can a profile of you be put together and made available to people who want to give you credit or who might consider employing you. And so in a sense, it's very healthy to have this computer revolution having people wake up and say, wow, the data is there. When is that beneficial? You know, how much should I have access to that information to correct mistakes or prevent it being sent around? And that'll be a great debate. And if we start it now, we'll get the answer well before we have an incredible problem. Although there will be individual stories about data that leaks that's not supposed to get out.